Elliot, you could take it from here.
Okay. Hello everyone, konnichiwa, dajahou, daigahou, and guten Morgen zusammen. Welcome to another Chemistry Europe Virtual Symposium, and indeed the first to be hosted by the European Journal of Inorganic Chemistry. We're delighted to be able to give a platform today for this research panel of researchers on the field of metal complex photocatalysis and to collaborate with our advisory board member Kenneth Lo of the City University of Hong Kong, who has been instrumental in putting this panel together today. If you aren't familiar with Ken, I'll give you a quick introduction. He became a full professor of the City University in 2001, where he became the chemistry program leader and plays a role in the Uni Research Committee. He completed his PhD at the University of Hong Kong and subsequently postdoc stints for Professors Alan Hill and Liu Lok Kong in the University of Oxford. Since then, he has been awarded multiple distinctions, including the APA Young Scientist Prize, Distinguished Lectureship Award for the Japanese Chemical Society, among others. And he now serves on multiple editorial boards, and we are lucky enough that one of those is EurJIC. And he was also the chair of the 23rd International Symposium for Photochemistry and Photophysics of Coordination Compounds, which I was lucky enough to attend, and which is the reason we chose him for this event today. I'm going to hand over to Ken just in a moment to moderate the session. But just before that, I'd like to mention that the talks will be recorded and they will be available for you to access afterwards. With that, I will hand over to Ken. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Elliot. So the idea of having a virtual symposium started when Elliot just mentioned when he visited Hong Kong back in 2019. And of course, more discussion with Pretty, the editor-in-chief of EurJIC, last summer led to the idea of an online symposium focusing on areas related to photochemistry and photophysics of inorganic and organometallic compounds. And sadly, due to the pandemic, many meetings have been cancelled or postponed. However, on a more positive note, it has promoted a number of online meetings without geographic boundaries, allowing us to reach out to a younger and wider audience as well. And so back to the theme of this virtual symposium, which is photoactive and photofunctional inorganic and organometallic metal complexes. Actually, they play very important roles in many different areas. For example, photocatalysis for water splitting and organic transformations, inorganic materials for dye-sensitized solar cells, photovoltaics, dopants for phosphorescent OLEDs and related devices for display and lighting. And regarding bioinorganic chemistry, metal complexes have been used as photoactivatable anti-cancer drugs, antiparasitics, and also photosensitizers for PDT, photodynamic therapy, theranostic agents, luminescent sensors for biomolecules and imaging reagents for time-resolved microscopy, etc. So there are plenty of challenges and opportunities ahead for inorganic photochemists and also colleagues working in related areas. We are very glad today to have three outstanding colleagues from two different continents joining us today at this very first EurJIC Virtual Symposium. So without further delay, I would like to introduce the first speaker, who is Professor Hajime Ito from Hokkaido University, Sapporo, Japan. I would like to mention that he is also an international advisory board member for our sister journal, EurJIC, European Journal of Organic Chemistry. So Professor Ito obtained his PhD in 1996 in Kyoto University, and he became the assistant professor in University of Tsukuba from 96 to 99. And then he also was the assistant professor at the Institute of Molecular Science, Japan from 1999 to year 2002. From 2001 to 2002, he was the research associate at the Scripps Research Institute under the supervision of Professor Kim Jenda. And from 2002 to 2010, he was associate professor of Hokkaido University. So since 2010, he has been the professor of Hokkaido University, And since 2018, he has been the Vice Director of the Institute for Chemical Reaction Design and Discovery at the same university. So Professor Ito's interest would be on the development of organic synthesis using copper, boron, and other organometallic compounds, new materials that show interesting optical properties in response to mechanical stress, and also mechanical-chemical synthesis. So the title of his talk today is Luminescent and Mechanical Properties of 4-1 Complexes. So I would like to invite Professor Ito. The stream is yours. Thank you.
Well, can you see this slide?
Yes. Yes.
It's on my camera. Is that okay?
Yes, we can see it. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Ken, for a very kind introduction. And I'm Hajime from Hokkaido University. I'm a little bit nervous because this is my first experience to attend such a very large, some international virtual conference. So, but I try to my best. And today's my talk is luminescent and the mechanical properties of gold complexes. So, for the first slide, I'd like to show the group photo of my group member. They are very fantastic. I'm very happy to study with chemistry with very fantastic some students and other members, and they work very hard and do wonderful jobs anytime. So today's lecture is a result of their super great efforts. In the first part of my talk, please let me please let me introduce some research fields. So my group has 3 different research directions. The first one is just some boron and silicon chemistry in solution. The second one is some mechanochromism and single crystal to single crystal transformation induced by mechanical stress. This is what I would like to show you today. And the third part is mechanochemical synthesis that was we started very recently. The first one is some boron and silicon chemistry for organic synthesis. Organoboron compound is a very important synthetic building block for some pharmaceutical or some optical property compounds. But especially some optically active organoboron compounds was previously not so very easy to synthesize. But about 20 years ago, we found that copper cathode boration can be a very good tools for construction of optically active organoboron compounds. So more recently, we started to use a computer for the simulational design for this compound. Now, the other part is some mechanochromism and single crystal to single crystal transformation of gold isocyanide complexes. During the study of our synthetic chemistry, we found the gold isocyanide complex can show a very interesting mechanochromic. That is some optical property response against mechanical stimulation to the solid material complexes. For example, you can add some mechanical stress on the surface of this compound. You can see the color change as a luminescence of the some mechanical stimulations. So we also more recently found some small mechanical stimulation also can induce the single crystal to single crystal transformation all over the crystals. This is more sensitive to the mechanical stress. And the third part is we just started the new research directions that by just combining our experience about some organic synthesis in solution and some mechanochromic studies in the solid. This research can allow you to synthesize many compounds with ball mill under the solventless conditions. this synthetic method is very powerful, and you can synthesize many new compounds that cannot be synthesized previous conventional method. If I have a chance, I would like to show this new part of our study. So this is maybe some concept of this study I would like to today, and there are very great scale gap between our real world and the molecular world. So our real world is just some scale, but some in the molecular world, the scale, some size scale is very, very small compared to our real scales. So I think this is a very general problem in chemistry. So we cannot manipulate directly the molecules by our hand. In other words, we don't know how to touch to the molecules directly by our hand. So I have been studying the synthetic chemistry more than 20 years, but 2007 we found a very interesting compounds during our study for some synthetic chemistry. That is this dinuclear gold complex. This is a fairly stable compound. We can treat this compound under the air. As you can see, this compound shows a very. As you can see, this compound was very white as a white powder under room light, but under the UV light illumination, you can see the very blue luminescence of this compound. If you add the mechanical stress on the surface of this compound, you can see the very rapid color change from blue to yellow. This is a very typical mechanochromic luminescence property. And if you use a more larger Ajit motor, Ajit pestle, you can see the more drastic color change from blue to yellow as shown here. This is we found this phenomena more about 14 years ago, but now this mechanochromic property is very popular. Many researchers also reported similar thing, but this is, I think, almost first example for the reversible mechanochromic luminescence. The interesting is if you add the solvent on the surface of the yellow colored surface, you can see that this yellow color was rapidly reverted to the original blue color. And you add the solvent and you evaporate the solvent, and you can change this blue color to the yellow color again. And you can enjoy this color change repeatedly. And we already checked that this color change can be repeated at least 20 times without any color degradation. And this color change was not observed in some room light. Only some color change was observed under UV light illumination, like blue to yellow. And this color change was reverted to the original blue color by adding some organic solvent. And this is a luminescent mechanochromism. And in this gold complex, for the case of the gold complex, Professor Eisenberg US already reported this gold complex shows luminescence intensity change just outside the mechanical stress of the crystal compounds of these molecules. And almost same time to our publication, Professor Mutai and Araki in Tokyo University, this pyrene-based organic compounds also shows a very similar luminescent mechanochromism. They reported this results in JACS, and maybe their paper and our paper can trigger this field of research. And many other researchers, I guess, try to scratch their solid luminescent compounds to find some mechanochromic properties. And many researchers reported similar phenomena in many papers. But our paper is not the first case of mechanochromic luminescence. Just our paper is the first example for reversible mechanochromic luminescence. Before our paper, many other researchers reported the similar mechanochromic luminescence. But I think our paper can be maybe trigger this research. And now some luminescent mechanochromism research is one of the very hot topic in the material science. This page may show you some cartoon-like explanation about some mechanism of some color change phenomena I showed in the first movie. In the first state, blue color state, the compounds should be some crystalline state. We already checked the crystal structure of this state, and the addition of the mechanical stress can change this crystal structure to amorphous. And in the amorphous state, we believe that orophilic interaction that can change the luminescence color of gold complexes, and this orophilic interaction is attractive interaction. Maybe some amorphous state, this orophilic interaction can form. And amorphous state, some thermodynamic stability of the amorphous state would be the more thermodynamically unstable compared to the crystalline state. So when we add some solvent, this solvent can induce a recrystallization to the more thermodynamically stable crystalline state. So this compound was found completely by chance. So we try to find, for the first time, we try to find a catalyst, not photocatalyst, just some transition metal catalyst. We try to find a catalyst by using this structure, but we did not find any catalytic activity about this. This is very, very stable compounds that this cannot show any catalytic activity. Instead of the catalytic activity, we found a very fantastic mechanochromic luminescence property. So for the first time, we have any idea why this compound shows mechanochromic luminescence properties. This compound shows a 2 pentafluorophenyl group, 2 gold some metal center, and 1 isotonyl benzene structures. Really, the structure totally looks very strange, but we don't know what is the most important point. So then for the next step, we try to make a more simplified compound to detect the most important point for the mechanochromic luminescence property of gold isotonyl complex. Surprisingly, this is very simple compounds, but there were no example for synthesis of these compounds before our study. So we try to synthesize these compounds, but at first not so very easy. But one of my students succeeded to synthesize of this compound. So this is very simple isotonyl complex shows a very nice mechanochromic luminescence properties. This blue part is a pristine, just synthesized blue color crystal. But after the mechanical stress, this compound shows a very nice yellow color change. So this is the crystal structure of the blue, some as prepared complexes. So these molecules were arranged into the crystal structure as a head-to-tail dimer. And these compounds, these molecules was connected by CH pi interactions. And there are no orophilic interaction. Orophilic interaction is very important for their structure and luminescence properties. This absence of the orophilic interaction is just a match to the some blue emissive properties of this these crystals. And these compounds can crystallize as a typical herringbone structure. So some previous first complex shows some crystal to amorphous structure change, but this complex shows a very different structure change. This complex shows a crystal to crystal change. So this is a XRD result, XRD analysis results of the crystalline blue colored crystals. Yellow one, previous some compounds in the first movie that shows amorphous, but in this case, crystals, also crystals. And the other some different thing is that this color structure change was very rapid. Previous crystal was not so, maybe some part of the structure change was very rapid, but some completely structure change to the amorphous, not so very rapid, but this case, the crystal to crystal change was very rapid. Okay, these results give us some very interesting idea about that. So maybe there are some kind of amplification effect for some mechanical stress for some crystal phase change. So one of my students tried to put some very small mechanical stress on the surface of the crystals to make some yellow spot. And surprisingly, this spot was spontaneously developed for the crystal just after the 9 hours. This color change was just induced by very small mechanical stress onto the surface. So the other interesting is if you make a similar yellow spot to the group of the crystals, this phase change can develop across the boundary of the crystals. This is very interesting, and some other crystals that was not contacted to this yellow part was not changed. This yellow color change was just induced by contacting of the yellow phase. So then we did another experiment. We put the yellow crystals onto the blue crystal. After 1 hour, new yellow phase was emerged on the surface of blue crystals, and this crystal was automatically self-replicatively developed to some entire blue crystals. Similar contacting-induced color change was observed like this. And if you mix the yellow and blue crystals, you can observe some development of yellow part after 2 hours. So the other interesting is that this yellow part, this crystal change was proceeded through the single crystal to single crystal phase transitions. So we can analyze the structure of this part. And this is the crystal structure of the yellow part. And some molecules are connected through the pi-pi interaction through the CN bond. And there are very strong olefinic interaction in this case. And this molecule was connected through these strong interactions to make some 1D-like, polymer-like structure in the crystals. So this is an explanation for the mechanism of this structure change. At first, molecule was trapped in the crystal structure as a metastable, kinetically trapped some situation. But the small mechanical stress can change this structure to the thermodynamically more stable yellow emissive structure connected through the olefinic interactions. So this part is more thermodynamically more stable compared to the blue part. So molecule was transferred from blue part to yellow to develop some yellow part. This is some explanation of this crystal structure change. This is similar to some seed and growth mechanism. Maybe this is some mechanical induced seed and growth mechanism. So we decided to call this phenomena as a molecular domino. So this is a summary of some summary of some emission of the allyl gold isocyanate complexes. Some allyl gold isocyanate complexes usually shows not so very strong emission in solution, but in the crystal structure, this complex often shows a very stronger emissions. Maybe some non-emissive decay of the excited state was inhibited in the crystal structure, like AI mechanism. And gold isocyanate complex often shows a polymorphs in the crystal structure. And if you can add the mechanical stress to make the other polymorphs that have olefinic interactions, olefinic interactions, attractive interactions, that is some similar to hydrogen bond in their some energy. And this olefinic interaction has a very big impact for some luminescence property of these compounds. Usually, some luminescence efficiency was enhanced, and red shifted emission usually observed after formation of some olefinic interaction. And I would like to show another example for single crystal to single crystal transformation by adding the 2 methyl group of this phenyl isocyanide complexes. And this is a crystal structure just after the synthesis. And the molecules are aggregated with hexameric structure. And this complex, this crystal structure also already shows a very strong olefinic interactions. So this is some microscope image for mechanical stimulation of this compound. This is a single crystal of this complex. And my student put some mechanical stress on the surface of this crystal structure by using the metal rod. This is some mechanical spot of the mechanical stimulation. As you can see, some single crystal phase emerged from this part. And this new phase was developed to some crystals. It is interesting to see this direction is very fast and this direction is not so very fast. But after several minutes, this phase change was completed to some blue color new crystal structures. This structure is some blue shifted emissions. So we also try to the seeding in this single crystal to single crystal phase change. This is a blue colored crystals. My student put this crystal to attach this green emissive crystals. The new phase emerged from the some area that blue crystal can first contact to this green crystals. As you can see, new phase was developed to the crystals. Maybe this crystal structure change can spread some across some crystal boundary. This is very interesting some phenomena for these crystals. So this is a crystal structure after the phase change. This can show the blue luminescence. And the crystal structure of this crystal structure is very different from some previous one. The complex was situated situated as some maybe layer-like structures. So this is one layer, and the other layer is onto the next layer is onto the top part of this layer. And interestingly, there are no olefinic interaction already. Instead of the olefinic interaction, you can find the CH5 interaction. Maybe olefinic interaction have some kind of maybe some stability of some enthalpic stability, but this CH5 interaction would compensate for the loss of some enthalpy stabilization came from the olefinic interactions. So we also reported the transient mechanochromism, multicolor mechanochromism, and some screening approach for finding the new mechanochromic compounds by just putting another substituent on some center part, or some near IR mechanochromic compounds by introducing some anthracene part on the gold complex. So our next challenge is some semi-rational design of this crystalline phase change. I think it's very, very difficult to design such some crystal phase change, but we think if we can use dynamic chirality concept, we can do semi-rational design for this phase change. So the concept is I would like to show some idea of the concept. These compounds in these compounds, this bond can rotate freely in solution, but in solid, these compounds can fix in the crystal structure if we are very happy, these compounds can some fix in the chiral structure in the crystal. If we can synthesize two complexes, two crystals, one crystal if they have a non-central symmetric crystals, and the other one is central symmetric crystals. And usually, non-central symmetric crystals, so-called chiral crystals, usually show the thermodynamically less stable compared to the this is a racemic crystal compared to the racemic crystal that have a more thermodynamically more stable some structures. So we try to synthesize some chiral crystals, non-central symmetric crystals. We try to green these compounds. We succeeded to change this structure to the racemic structure. Fortunately, this photoluminescent property of this complex, this crystal and this powder is completely different. And this is I think we have succeeded some simulational design of this mechano-induced crystal structure change. So we then try to synthesize a reversible single crystal to single crystal induced by mechanical stress. The first some example is a single crystal, reversible. In the first movie, I showed reversible mechanochromic luminescence property, and the second part I show the single crystal to single crystal phase change. But in the second case, that cannot be the reversible because after the phase change, this structure is thermodynamically more stable compared to the pristine structures. But we try to single crystal to single crystal version of the reversible mechanochromic luminescence by just changing some methanol vapor. So this is a experimental setup of this study. We synthesize a crystal of this compound from the methanol, and we put this crystal to the petri dish with the methanol vapor. And we can change some concentration of the methanol vapor by putting the lid of petri dish or by removing the some lid of the petri dish. This is a movie of this experiment. As you can see, this crystal first shows a green emission. But my student cut this crystal by knife. And as you can see, you can find the growth of the green part, just the part of the cutting of these crystals. After several minutes, this green part was disappeared and some all crystal was changed to the orange color. And in this crystal structure, methanol was maybe released. This crystal first have some methanol inside the crystal, but some mechanical source can trigger some release of methanol. This is some reason for this color change. So after the some single crystal to single crystal structure change, we put some lid onto the petri dish to increase the methanol concentration. As you can see, some red color was disappeared and some original green color was some reversed. This process was proceeded through the single crystal to single crystal transformation. This is a crystal structure of these two crystals. This is a green crystal. This includes the methanol. But this methanol was released by just after the cutting of this crystal. And then this crystal was changed to orange colored crystal. In the orange colored crystals, there are no methanol. And by increasing some concentration of the methanol vapor, this orange crystal can be reverted to the original green colored crystals. So this is the final part of my talk. And the previous talk, I just showed some mechanical induced structure change of some crystal gold complex, and we can observe the structure change through the optical observations. But some organic interaction was known to enhance by the strong light in the solution. Only solution, some paper shows the strong light can enhance the organic interaction. But if we can do this in the solid state, we can induce a structure change through the light, and maybe the structure change, just my very crazy imagination, this structure change can induce the generation of the power. So first we try to screen some single crystal structure that shows photochromic properties. Fortunately, this compound, this gold complex, can show a very nice photochromic luminescence property. And fortunately, this photochromic can induce some structure change. This is some structure before the photoirradiation. And you can see after the photoirradiation, the structure was completely changed and orophilic interaction was drastically enhanced. We also studied the DFT calculation to see to understand the mechanism, but I'd like to skip this part because of the time limitations. So this crystal can show some so-called salient effect. So this is a final movie for this presentation. This is a crystal of this compound, and this part will be jumped away after some phase change. And please open your eyes, because only one time you can see this jump phenomena. Don't close your eye. Okay, now the part is jumped away. So this is very difficult to see this phenomena. Many times we just moving, or jump and disappear, or just cracking. Maybe only less than 5% of compounds crystal can jump, and the other one is almost more than 90% of just shows the cracking. So this is final part. I think that this gap is very large, but if we can synthesize very nice inorganic complexes, inorganic crystals, we can observe or we can handle the crystal molecular structure and crystal structure by just adding the macro scale mechanical stress. So thank you. I would like to thank my wonderful colleagues, and I also appreciate some fundings. So thank you very much for kindly some attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Hajime, for this very inspiring lecture. I mean, the domino effect. I saw that you're touching all these blue blocks, turning that into gold blocks, which is very fascinating. Also, jumping at it. It's like a chameleon. We do receive a number of questions now, actually, during your talk. So I'll just, we have limited time, but I'll try my best to include as many as possible. The first question is was asked by Syed Sibay Rasi. Excuse me if I pronounce your name wrongly. So he asked, what is the difference between mechano and piezochromic materials, and why did you choose gold? Because it's quite expensive. So what's your answer?
No, I could not get it.
Sorry. What is the difference between mechano and piezochromic materials?
Piezochromic. This is maybe some definition of the terms.
Right.
Maybe piezochromic is maybe some different terms. Just maybe there are some kind of terms for the related to some thermodynamic difference between the mechano and piezo. I think the mechanochromic is a more larger terms for that can show the very large different phenomena about maybe just a mechanical response against a mechanical source.
And why did you choose gold? Because it's quite expensive.
Gold?
Yes. Why did you choose gold?
Honestly speaking, I first choose some isocyanide. We try to make many other isocyanide complex with many other transition metals, and finally we found the gold complex shows a very interesting mechanochromic luminescence properties. We tried platinum and we tried palladium for development of some synthetic catalyst, but we could not find. Finally, we found the gold complex shows another fantastic phenomena.
Okay, this is the question from Stephen Brown. He asked, "Can you explain where can we use this study to apply in which field of study? I mean, in terms of applications."
That's a very difficult problem. Actually, honestly speaking, I sent many samples to the company so many times to ask them to they ask me to they want to samples to try to something, but maybe many companies cannot find a good applications. Maybe this phenomena inspire our imagination so much. But the different thing is how to get the money, how to sell these compounds.
Mm-hmm. Okay, right. The next question is from Masahiro Yoshimura.
Okay.
So the question was, mechanochemical crystal structure change may occur by moisture in the air and not only by mechanical chromic effect, but mechanochemical plus transient liquid phase. So what's your comment on that?
Okay, maybe he wanted to know the combination of the stimulus. Yes, maybe almost last slide, I just a combination of the mechanical stress and methanol vapor. Methanol vapor was used as some reverse the phase change. Maybe such combination can give us some possibility to develop the more interesting mechanochromic compounds.
Okay. The next question is from our old friend Sylvester Bonnet.
Okay.
So he said, a very nice talk. And he was asking, are metallophilic interactions stronger with gold 1 or platinum 2? Gold 1 or platinum 2?
I'm sure maybe gold 1 is maybe stronger, but the platinum complex usually have some 4 coordinations number. This means some platinum usually covered by other ligand. But in the gold case, only 2 ligands. This means some gold is more sterically some less congested compared to platinum. This is another advantage for some gold compared to the platinum. Platinum also have a similar some metallophilic interactions.
Okay, the next question is from Babak Kabudin. So thank you for your nice talk. I have a simple question. Changing from yellow to blue color, what is important interaction? Is it gold-gold interaction, or is it the AR-pi-pi interaction? And did you try with other transition metals? I think a similar question.
Transition metals. We never tried to other transition metals because aromatic gold isolate complexes are very versatile platform to find the mechano-responsive complexes. We synthesized more than 200 different gold isolate complexes. Many complexes have very interesting properties, but honestly speaking, we have no time to see other metals for this study.
Okay. I am afraid that because of limited time, maybe I will ask the last question also. From our old friend, Sebastiano Campagna. In crystal-to-crystal transformation by contact induction, is it possible to revert that direction? I mean, turning the opposite direction. For example, by temperature changes or just by addition of solvents. Would it be possible?
Maybe, we did not observe such a reversible phase change. Maybe blue part is thermodynamically more unstable and the yellow part is stable. Maybe this is just some downhill process. We should add some another energy to revert this one. Maybe hot irradiation, or maybe some another stimulus by vapor or something. But we did not find such a reversibility to the some single crystal to single crystal transformation. The final one is a little bit similar, similar to the some reversible phase change.
Okay, thank you, Hajime. I'm afraid that because of time, in the interest of time, we have to stop at this point. I'm sure that for those colleagues or students who are interested or have asked a question, maybe you can direct your question directly to Kenneth, and you'll be very happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And the next speaker today is Professor Jianzhang Zhao from Dalian University of Technology, mainland China. So he is also, just want to mention that he's also an international advisory board member of EurJIC, our journal. So Professor Zhao received his PhD in organic chemistry from Dalian University in year 2000. And after postdoctoral research at Pohang University of Science and Technology in South Korea, the Max Planck Research Unit for Enzymology of Protein Folding in Germany, and also in University of Bath in the UK from year 2000 to 2005. Excuse me. He returned to China to take his current position. And his research interests are synthesis of triplet photosensitizers and study of electron charge and electron spin transport of organic materials with steady state and femtosecond or nanosecond transient absorption spectroscopic methods, as well as pulse laser excited time resolved electron paramagnetic resonance (TR-EPR) spectroscopy. And he has published more than 200 papers on peer-reviewed journals and also book chapter. And the title of his talk today is Preparation of Visible Light Harvesting Transition Metal Complexes, Photophysical Properties and Applications. So the stream is yours, Professor Zhao. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your introduction. Today is my honor to present my recent research on metal complexes. These new complexes show strong absorption of visible light and long-lived triplet state. They are very useful for application in photocatalysis. The research in my group is focused on interaction of light with chemicals. We studied the absorption, emission, especially the intersystem crossing of the compounds we prepared. Recently, we are interested in studying the electron spin polarization of intersystem crossing because the intersystem crossing is electron spin selective. That means the three sublevels of the triplet state is not equally populated. That will give us very much information about the intersystem crossing. There are basically three areas in for the research in my group, but today I'm going to talk about only the research on transition metal complexes showing strong absorption of visible light and long-lived triplet states. And because the conventional complexes don't show strong absorption of visible light, and the triplet lifetime is short, they are not very good for application. So we need to design new molecules to show stronger absorption and longer triplet lifetime. In our group, we do synthesis, and then we study the photophysical properties with steady state and time result spectroscopy methods. We focus on triplet photosynthesizers. These compounds are very useful. They can be used for photodynamic therapy to synthesize singulate oxygen to kill the cancer cells. They can also be used for organic for oxygen sensor or photon observation, solar cells, and hydrogen evolution, and catalytic organic reactions. In all these applications, they share two common photophysical processes, that is electron transfer or energy transfer. Basically, these two processes are intermolecular processes. So the efficiency is dependent on the property of the photosynthesizer you used. Let's see a simple example. The application of photosynthesizers in triplet annihilation observation. In this observation method, we need two compounds. One is the photosynthesizer, another one is the small organic molecule give strong fluorescence. The first step is absorption of the light, and then intersystem crossing to populate the triplet state. The intermolecular triplet energy transfer to the small organic molecule is critical to the observation. With longer lifetime for the photosynthesizer, we will have a more efficient intermolecular energy transfer. Then we will have more stronger or more efficient observation. So this is the reason why we want to design new photosynthesizers showing a longer triplet lifetime. It's clear if your compound have strong absorption of light, that means you have higher concentration of molecules at the excited state. That means you will have a stronger absorption intensity. So basically, we need the photosynthesizers to show strong absorption of light and also a long-lived triplet state. For sure, you need efficient intersystem crossing. So with simple calculation, we will see the difference for photosynthesizers showing short lifetime or longer lifetime. With longer lifetime, we will have a much more efficient intermolecular energy transfer. But for the conventional metal complexes, the absorption in visible region is usually very weak. So the molar absorption coefficients is less than 20,000. So it's not strong compared to organic chromophores. The triplet lifetime is also short. It's only a few microseconds. It's much longer than fluorescence lifetime, but this lifetime is still not long enough for a better application in photocatalysis or conversion. So these are the typical traditional metal complexes. Some of them are still used until now in photocatalysis, like the ruthenium complex or the iridium complex. Actually, they show very weak absorption of visible light, and the triplet state lifetime is also short. So how to design new compounds showing stronger absorption of visible light and a longer lifetime? Based on the research of other researchers and the work from my own group, we realized that we can change the normal MLCT state, that means the metal to ligand charge transfer state, to the pipette state by introducing organic chromophore into the metal complex. We have to make sure the pipette state is with lower energy than the MLCT state. We know for the transition from ground state to MLCT state is actually partially forbidden because we have very poor molecular orbital overlap for the HOMO and LUMO. That will lead to a very weak absorption of light because the transition probability is low. We also know that for pipette transition, it has a very good molecular orbital overlap. That means we will have a higher transition probability. Accordingly, we will have a stronger absorption of light. So by changing the excited state, we can change the photophysical property of the complex. If we switch from MLCT state to pipette state, we will have a weaker spin orbital coupling for the pipette triplet state, because in this case, the contribution from the metal to the triplet state is very small. With smaller spin orbital coupling for the triplet state, we will have a longer triplet lifetime. The reason for the short triplet lifetime of ruthenium complex is because there is a very large spin orbital coupling for the MLCT triplet state. That strong coupling will reduce the triplet lifetime. So by using organic chromophore as a ligand, the chromophore should be with proper energy level compared to the MLCT state. Then we will have a strong absorption of visible light, and we will also have much longer triplet lifetime. That will improve the property of our triplet photosynthesizer. So let's see a few examples for TT conversion. These are the complexes used as a photosynthesizer for TT conversion, but it's not easy to modify these complexes. Another typical photosynthesizer is ruthenium complex, but this one, we can see the lifetime, the triplet lifetime is very short, less than 1 microseconds. It's not enough to make a very efficient conversion. That means you need a very strong laser to excite the solution in order to observe conversion. This complex also shows weak absorption in visible region, so we need strong absorption in order to have more efficient conversion. So firstly, we studied a few complexes showing much longer triplet lifetime than this model one. This one, the lifetime is very short, only 0.5 microseconds. But for these two, we observed very long triplet lifetime. From the spin density of the T1 state, we can see for the model complex, its MLCT state, the metal contribute a lot to the T1 state. But for the new one, the contribution from the metal is very small. That means we will have a weaker spin orbital coupling. Then we will get a much longer triplet lifetime. So with longer lifetime, we will have much more efficient triplet energy transfer in the TT observation. That means we will have a much stronger observation intensity and efficiency. From the quenching constant, we can see the quenching constant of the new one is about 200 times higher than the normal, the conventional one. That means with longer triplet lifetime, we will have more efficient energy transfer. That will make the observation much stronger. For the model complex, we didn't observe an observation under the same condition, but for the new one, we see very strong blue emission with green laser excitation. So that means the long lifetime will make a difference for the triplet photosynthesizers. Another new idea we studied for the observation is using dark triplet state. So normally the photosynthesizer used for observation is with strong phosphorescence. So actually the phosphorescence is competing with the intermolecular energy transfer. So we don't need the T1 state of the photosynthesizer to be phosphorescent. So therefore we prepared a complex which is almost non-phosphorescent compared to the model one. So we reduced the emission efficiency to about less than 1% from 8%. So basically this complex is with a dark T1 state. And we confirmed with the dark T1 state, actually we can have a stronger observation because we can have more efficient intermolecular energy transfer with the longer triplet lifetime. So next example, I will show how to design a new triplet photosynthesizer and long lifetime intersystem crossing. It's not easy to prepare such complex. Simply connection chromophore to metal complex will not lead to efficient intersystem crossing. If we look at this molecule, actually this phenol ring separates the body P chromophore from the metal center. That means the intersystem crossing will be poor if we excite this part. So let's see the energy diagram. Body P is actually with lower energy than the metal coordination structure. So if you excite body P part, also you have strong absorption of light, but the intersystem crossing is non-efficient. That means the energy will be trapped on this part. It will not give you high efficiency triplet production. So based on this molecule, we prepared a new one. The difference is in this new one, we directly connect the metal to the chromophore pi conjugation center. By doing that, we will have very efficient intersystem crossing. That will be different from this reported complex. So this is the synthesis, a long synthesis route that will maybe wonderful for supervisors, but that will be painful for graduate students. It's not easy to get the final product with high yield. So with some routine spectral study, we can see the absorption of this complex is very strong in the right yellow region, much stronger compared to the model complex. The model complex, the PT2 only gives very weak absorption in the UV region. The new one gave a very strong near IR emission close to 800 nanometer. That means we have very efficient intersystem crossing. Otherwise, we won't observe any strong emission in near IR region. The non-radiative decay will deactivate the T1 state. We will not observe strong phosphorescence emission. That means the direct connection method is good to have efficient intersystem crossing. The triplet lifetime of the new complex is also much longer than the model one because we have different triplet state for the two complexes. For the new one, we have pi-pi triplet state, but for the model one, we have MLCT triplet state. They have different spin orbital coupling, then they have different triplet state lifetime. This is the spin density of the T1 state. We can see for the new one, we have very small contribution from the metal, but for the model one, we have a stronger or larger contribution from the metal. That will reduce the triplet lifetime. So with strong absorption of visible light at the long lifetime, long T1 state lifetime, we will have a better application performance for the new complexes. We have more efficient TTA upconversion. With similar method, we prepared the different complexes. So for these two examples, we can observe similar strong absorption of visible light, but the intersystem crossing efficiency is very different. For this one, with the direct connection, we have a higher intersystem crossing quantum yield. But for this one, we have much lower intersystem crossing quantum yield. So we cannot simply connect organic chromophore to a metal center to prepare efficient photosynthesizer. We have to use proper linker to ensure we have efficient intersystem crossing. So we prepared some different complexes. All these complexes show a very strong absorption of visible light because they contain organic chromophore, coumarin or body P. All these chromophore give strong absorption of visible light. We also observed long triplet lifetime for these complexes. The application of these complexes is not limited to TTA upconversion. If the complexes is strongly phosphorescent, then we can use these compounds for oxygen sensing because in the presence of oxygen, the phosphorescence will be quenched. The quenching will give us information about the oxygen concentration. The longer the triplet lifetime, the more sensitive the sensor will be. So we compared these two complexes. We observed we can have more than 100-fold increasement in the sensitivity if we use a complex with much longer phosphorescence lifetime than the model one. Some commercial optical oxygen sensor is actually using phosphorescent material for the oxygen detection. So we can expect if we use complexes with much longer triplet lifetime, so probably we can have better sensitivity for oxygen detection. That means we can detect the oxygen at a very low concentration. Another idea we studied is to prepare broadband absorption triplet photosynthesizer. Perhaps you noted this. For normal photosynthesizers, we have only one chromophore in the molecular structure. With only one chromophore, actually, we always have a single absorption band in visible region. That is interesting phenomenon, but I think there is no clear answer for this experiment result. So why we always have a single absorption band, not two or not three? Because if you use solar light to do photocatalysis or to prepare solar cells, we hope the photosynthesizer will have broadband absorption in order to use the broadband solar light. But for normal photosynthesizers, we have only one chromophore in the molecular structure, and we have only one major absorption band. That is not good for application. I think the answer to this problem is we can prepare a photosynthesizer contain energy donor and energy acceptor. Both parts give absorption, but at different wavelengths. It's similar to the Fret molecules. So in the normal Fret molecules, we have energy donor and energy acceptor. They give different absorption. And then we have the emission from energy acceptor. But here we make a further step. We modified the structure of energy acceptor to have efficient intersystem crossing. We don't need a strong fluorescence emission, but we need efficient intersystem crossing to transform the broadband excitation energy to the triplet energy. So this is our basic idea. So we prepared this complexes. It contains two parts, the body P part and this NDI part. These two parts give different absorption. So we cover a large part of the visible region. And then because the acceptor is directly connected to the metal, so we can expect efficient intersystem crossing for the energy acceptor. So we use some routine method to confirm we have Fret in this molecule. And then we also confirm we don't have electron transfer in this two chromophore compound. In this case, we don't want to get a charge separated state. We want to have a high yield of triplet state. So we don't want photo-induced electron transfer. With the nanosecond transient absorption, we confirmed the triplet state is localized on NDI part, not on body P part. This is dependent on the relative T1 energy levels of these two parts. We also did a simple experiment to confirm the photosynthesizers with broadband absorption is actually more efficient than the photosynthesizers contain only one chromophore. So this is the structure for conventional triplet photosynthesizer. So we have a single chromophore, but we have only one major absorption band. But for the new one, we have much broader absorption. The experiments confirmed that we can have more efficient singlet oxygen production with a white light excitation because we have broad absorption. So I think this method will be useful for photocatalysis. We prepared other metal complexes based on similar idea. So this one, we cover a large part of the visible region from 400 to more than 700 nanometer. With femtosecond transient absorption, we confirmed the singlet energy transfer takes about 50 picoseconds from the blue one to the red one. And the intersystem crossing of the red one will take about 1 nanoseconds. For this one, maybe another painful work for students because this complex is not easy to prepare. We cannot prepare this one with stepwise method. We have to prepare this one with a one-pot reaction. That means we have to mix 3 different starting materials together, and we will get a mixture of at least 3 products. And the students have to isolate everyone to identify the structure. But finally, we get this complex, and we confirm the structure with a single crystal analysis. Some routine spectral studies, we confirm the complex shows a broadband absorption and the singlet energy transfer and the long-lived triplet state localized on this red part, not the blue one. We also confirmed that the singlet energy transfer takes about 4 picoseconds. The intersystem crossing of the red part takes about 50 picoseconds. The last example is we prepared a complex with Ping-Pong energy transfer. That means we can selectively excite the green part. The green part is actually isolated from the red one because we use the phenol linker between these two paths. So actually they take perpendicular geometry. So there is no pi conjugation between these two paths. So we can treat these two paths as separated one. We can also singulate energy transfer takes about 7 picoseconds. Then we will have a fast intersystem crossing takes less than 1 picoseconds. Then we observe a backward triplet energy transfer to the body P part. It takes about 150 picoseconds. In this case, we are unable to observe the singulated state because the intersystem crossing is faster than the singulated energy transfer. We don't get an accumulation of singulated state in the solution. So we always we observe the singulated energy transfer and then the triplet energy transfer backward to the organic chromophore. The last example is we show that the application of this kind of new complexes is just at the beginning. The future will be promising because some researchers studied the application of these complexes in hydrogen evolution. And we can see with the new complexes, the hydrogen evolution rate constant is much more larger than the normal complexes. I think this one is still used in photocatalysis, but actually you have much better solution. You can use the new complexes showing strong absorption of visible light and a long lifetime. So you will get a much larger turnover number or turnover frequency for the photocatalysis. So I think in this case, both the supervisors and the students will be happy because you can have very good data and you can have very good publication. As a summary, in our group, we studied a different type of triplet photosynthesizer, but today I only introduced the metal complexes. So actually we prepared also organic triplet photosynthesizers based on heavy atom effect or even without any heavy atom, like with the twisted structure or a molecule contains radical or connected with the fullerene. All these organic compounds will give strong absorption of visible light and very long triplet lifetime. We can have even longer lifetime than the metal complexes. We have confirmed the application of this compound in photodynamic therapy is very promising. So this is my group. My group is here, very close to South Korea and Japan, also close to Hong Kong. This picture was taken before the pandemic. Maybe nowadays we cannot move freely without restrictions. I'm grateful to the funding agency and my collaborators and also my students for their hard working. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jianzhang, for this very interesting and stimulating talk. So for the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box and I'll read them out to Professor Zhao. Maybe if it's all right, maybe I ask a very simple question first. You have very long-lived triplex assay for these very fancy, very interesting conjugates. I assume that you have done some biological work on that because of the very efficient generation of single oxygen. Did you do anything? Did you do any work on that?
I did only very simple study with the complexes in the biological study, but they are effective for producing singulated oxygen. I didn't do any detailed study.
Right. I see. Okay. Now we do have some questions. One question is again from Sylvester Bonnet. Very nice talk. You discussed the evolution of the TTAUC quantum yield with the lifetime. I assume there's triplet annihilation up conversion quantum yield with a lifetime. And he's asking, what about the ITH, the light intensity threshold at which it will go from a 2-photon to a 1-photon like kinetics? So have you got any idea on that?
Okay, we studied this problem. So normally for the complexes I introduced, we didn't observe two photon the threshold for one photon excitation. We always observe a linear curve between the evacuation intensity and the excitation power density. That means this system is very efficient. Normally for other complexes, we will observe changing from two photon excitation to one photon excitation. We will observe a threshold. But for these complexes, we always, at a very low power density, we already have the linear curve. So that means the long lifetime will make the evacuation very efficient.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Another question is from Ken Tao Xin. I don't exactly 100%. I don't really understand the question, but I just read out to see whether you have an idea because you know it best. The chromophore was very difficult. I guess it was very difficult to make, and so was the chromophore for the iridium catalyst. So can you comment on how difficult to prepare these conjugates, including the metal containing moiety and also the organic part? Is it very difficult? I saw that one of the examples you had you had to use a one-port synthesis involving very difficult sort of like separation of the three products. Would it be really extremely difficult? What is the usual yield for these compounds?
Sometimes we have very low yield, but normally in general, it's not difficult to prepare these complexes because the chromophore is easy to prepare. So we just use a proper coupling reaction to connect the chromophore to the metal center. It's not very difficult, but sometimes the yield can be very low or the complex can be unstable. So this is the problem.
I see. Okay, we have another friend now, Zoe Prigamanu from Birmingham. So she's asking, did you find any lifetime variation in different solvents?
Yes, we found the lifetime can be very different in different solvents. I think maybe there's no clear answer to this result, why they show very different lifetime in different solvents. But it can vary a lot, vary a lot.
Thank you. The next question is from Sarath Babu Sakumuli. So thank you for your wonderful talk. Is there any study towards a visible light photoredox catalyst using these new complexes?
Very few. The last example I showed is using these complexes in photocatalysis, but the application is very limited. But I don't know why people don't use these complexes. But actually, you can get much better results with these complexes.
Okay.
I think you can, yes.
Right, okay. The next question is by Suresh Matthew. So thanks for the wonderful talk. What type of instrumentation do we need in a laboratory for studying the photophysical properties of these inorganic complexes?
Okay, in order to study the intersystem crossing quantum yield, the simple one is to use UV with spectrometer to study the production of singlet oxygen. If you want to measure the triplet lifetime, you can use either a lifetime spectrometer to monitor the photofluorescence decay, or you can also use a nanosecond transient absorption spectrometer to directly detect the non-emissive T1 state. I think that will be enough. If you want to study the, okay.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I think we'll stop here and then we'll carry on with the next talk. Thank you very much, Professor Zhao, for this very interesting talk.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
The last speaker in today's symposium is another old friend of ours, Professor Oliver Wenger from University of Basel, Switzerland. So Professor Wenger received his PhD degree from the University of Bern in Switzerland in 2002 after working with Professor Hans Gödel. And following postdoctoral stays at Caltech with Professor Harry Gray from 2002 to 2004, and University of Strasbourg with Professor Jean Biazovac in 2004 to 2006, He became assistant professor at University of Geneva in 2006. In year 2009, he moved to the University of Göttingen, Germany, as associate professor. And he returned to Switzerland in 2012 to the University of Basel, where he was promoted to full professor in 2018. His research interests include photoinduced electron and energy transfer, photoredox catalysis, photoactive complexes with earth-abundant metals. So the title of his talk today is A Search for New Photophysics and Photochemistry with Metal Complexes. So Oliver, the stream is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken. I thank you a lot for the invitation. It's a pleasure to see you, even if it's only online. I hope you can see my screen. I can see something else from Jianzhang.
We can see your screen. That's great.
So I would also like to express my gratitude, of course, to the whole Wiley team for organizing this and for having me and for giving me a chance to talk about the research that my group has been doing over the past few years. So we're on this search for new photophysics and photochemistry of metal complexes. And today I'd like to briefly talk to you about 3 recent topics that relate to photocatalysis. And the first one here is connected to photochemical olefin hydrogenation. This here is in fact an old study by Pack and co-workers where they reduced these electron-deficient olefins here with a sacrificial electron donor that looks a bit like the naturally occurring NADH to these saturated versions here. And this was accomplished using rubidity as a photocatalyst in methanol. And this is very classical photoredox catalysis in the sense that it involves single electron transfer chemistry. There's a first reaction step here leading to this radical anion, and that is possible because the starting material here has these very electron withdrawing substituents here. And that activates it, of course, for single electron transfer. Subsequently, there can be protonation of this radical anion, and the proton sources the oxidized form of the sacrificial electron donor, leading to this intermediate here, which, following uptake of a second equivalent formally of hydrogen atoms, can form the ultimate product. Now, we were interested a few years back in Miriam Schreier's PhD thesis to look at possible other reaction modes for olefin reduction, namely ones that would not necessarily go via single electron transfer, but would perhaps imply photochemical or photoinduced hydrogen atom transfer reactions. So we consider these substrates here unactivated olefins in the sense of electron transfer reactivity, because they have no electron deficient substituents that would stabilize any radical anions. But as gemino disubstituted olefins, they remain, of course, very reactive compounds, which are, however, particularly prone to undergoing hydrogen atom transfer reactions, typically in thermal manner without use of any light. And so Miriam explored a variety of different substrates, many more than 5 here. I only highlight the ones that worked best, and I am not going to show any substrate scope tables here because the focus of Miriam's thesis was really on mechanistic understanding. And this reaction was catalyzed with an iridium complex, which is rather well known here. This turns out to be a pre-catalyst, this iridium-free chloro compound here. And one of the first mechanistic experiments that Miriam did, along with a postdoc from China, Xingwei Guo, is this radical clock experiment, where they observed that this starting material here converts to this ring opening rearrangement product. And that really strongly signals that there might be a radical intermediate of this type here, a tertiary carbon-centered radical that would be formed somehow along the way. And this radical intermediacy is further corroborated here by this correlation of product yields, of hydrogenation yields, that correlate rather well with these relative radical stabilities. You see here the benzylic radical, as you know, is quite stable, certainly with respect to this reference point here. And this is also the substrate for which Miriam gets the best yield. And then as she goes to less stable radical intermediates, the yields tend to decrease. Now this turned out to be a model reaction here, this particular substrate on which we discovered then that when we start from this iridium-3 chloro compound here and we monitor the reaction progress as a function of irradiation time, not much happens in the first hour here, blue data points. It is only after approximately an hour that the reaction begins to set in and that this hydrogenation product is indeed formed. However, when using the hydride complex here as a starting material or as a catalyst from the very beginning, there is immediate product formation, suggesting that over time, when irradiating this chloro compound here in presence of excess triethylamine, it actually converts to the iridium-3 hydride complex, and this is then the actually true catalytically active species. And this is supported by time-dependent UV-Vis absorption and proton NMR experiments. You see here UV-Vis spectra in green, notably the iridium hydride complex, which has this metal to ligand charge transfer absorption band around 430 nanometers, which is not there in the blue iridium chloro complex, or at least not as pronounced in the beginning. But as you irradiate the solution here in presence of triethylamine, you start to see how this band is growing in here. And at the same time, in proton NMR spectroscopy, you begin to see the hydride resonance. And so likely what happens here is that the iridium-3 chloro complex here undergoes reductive dehalogenation to this well-known and actually isolable intermediate. You can protonate this and you will get the iridium-3 hydride. In principle, outside photochemical scenarios, this in electrochemical settings, this chemistry is well known and well established. Now, this iridium-3 hydride complex here is, however, not yet the catalytically active species. When we let it sit in the dark along with the substrate, nothing happens. So we need further light activation of that iridium-3 hydride. We can promote it to a metal to ligand charge transfer excited state, which luminesces in the red with a lifetime of roughly 200 microseconds. And as we titrate in more and more triethylamine, we see quenching, presumably reductive excited state, quenching of this MLCT state here, leading us to this hypothetical iridium-2 hydride species, which we believe to be the catalytically active compound. And so we tried to detect this by transient UV-Vis absorption spectroscopy and failed. You see here what happens when we have the iridium-3 hydride in presence of triethylamine. We get quite a nice transient UV-Vis absorption spectrum, which, however, corresponds rather convincingly to the UV-Vis spectrum that we can measure for this isolable reference compound here. It is the iridium-1 compound that I mentioned previously, lacking a ligand. And so what we think is occurring here is a rapid reaction sequence as displayed here at the bottom. There is indeed reductive MLCT quenching, but then here we have an intermediate comprised of iridium-2 hydride where the metal hydrogen bond is very, very weak. We estimate it's on the order of 50 to 55 kcals per mole. So it's highly reactive and it wants to give away its hydrogen atom, and you will then end up with this more stable compound here. So this is a classical case of ABC reaction kinetics where you cannot observe the intermediate B because the reaction from B to C actually is faster than the reaction from A to B. Nevertheless, we arrived at this overall proposed mechanism here where the iridium chloro precursor compound, which is nice to handle because it's benchtop stable. You can activate that through reductive halogenation and presence of visible light and sacrificial electron donor to this isolable iridium-1 intermediate lacking a ligand. This can be protonated, I've shown you that, and you will get the iridium-3 hydride. Then promotion to the MLCT state here leads to reductive excited state quenching. Presumably this is the highly reactive species which we have been unable to detect because it reacts so fast with substrates or just about anything, and you will get these radical intermediates, for which I have shown you indirect evidence at the very beginning through the radical clock experiment and also through the product yield radical stability correlations. So I thoroughly enjoyed working with Miriam Schreier, Björn Pfund, and Jingwei Guo on this project because I learned a lot. I had the impression that there could be something other involved here, other than just the classic single electron transfer chemistry that we know so well from photoredox catalysis. And I think it will be an interesting avenue for us to look into photochemical hydrogen atom transfer with metal complexes also in the future. So that was basically 4 years of a PhD thesis that I summarized up here in these few minutes. And I'd like to do just the same in this second chapter, this time with the PhD thesis of Lucius Schmid, who has been working on ruthenium complexes targeting high triplet energies that are typically achieved only with cyclomethylated iridium complexes. Many of you will have noticed that triplet energy transfer catalysis is now receiving increasing attention by the synthetic preparative photoredox community. From the perspective of a physical inorganic chemist, triplet energy transfer is something very well known and extremely well established. But it is nice, it is good to see that this is now becoming synthetically useful. So there is a guideline. You can say that the higher the triplet energy, the greater the possible substrate scope that you can possibly activate with your sensitizer. And as I said, iridium, cyclomethylated iridium complexes have fairly high triplet energies, whereas ruthenium diimine compounds typically have significantly lower triplet energies and they're less directly applicable, perhaps, to triplet energy transfer catalysis. So we applied a concept here that is also, that in principle is well known. Vincent Ko, for example, at City University of Hong Kong, had worked on cyanoborelated rhenium complexes, also iridium complexes a while ago. And we have now applied this recently to ruthenium photophysics and photochemistry in order to achieve high triplet energies. And the way this works is perhaps best illustrated here by these cyclic voltammograms. And if you just focus on this metal-centered ruthenium-2, ruthenium-3 oxidation where my laser pointer is at now. This is cathodically shifted by about ½ volt upon cyanoborylation here, and that indicates to you that you're actually stabilizing the metal-centered T2G-like orbitals by approximately half an electron volt upon cyanoborylation. So you're opening up the HOMO-LUMO gap quite a bit, and this leads to high triplet energies, when at the same time doing chemical modifications on the bipyridine ancillary ligands, you can also achieve very high oxidation potentials for these complexes. So you get a first test reaction here for the triplet energy. This is a fairly trivial trans-cis photoisomerization of this methyl cinnamate ester here, which cannot be performed by Rubipi here because the triplet energy is too low. You can hardly obtain any of the cis product. But with the cyanoborelated ruthenium compounds, this now works nicely, perhaps even better than with some of the iridium complexes. So that's just the first test. And then you can look into more, perhaps more synthetically relevant reactions, such as, for example, this nickel-catalyzed cross-coupling reaction between an aryl halogenide and a carboxylate here. One of the mechanistic proposals that is around in the literature is that this occurs via triplet energy transfer to a nickel catalyst. There are also other proposals that rely more on dark circles. And the iridium complexes are typically employed for this, typically keeping in mind that they have high triplet energies. Rubeppi does not work, but the cyanoborolated complexes again do work rather beautifully in our test reactions that we have made. That's a scenario that relates mostly to triplet energy transfer catalysis. Here's an example illustrating the application potential of this class of compound for oxidative photoredox. You have here an initial oxidative decarboxylation to this alpha amino alkyl radical that then adds to the Michael acceptor to form this carbon-carbon bond here. So that works well with the cyanoborylated complex here, but you cannot do that with Rubeppi because it's just not oxidizing enough. Likewise, here this rather trivial Pinocol reaction here works quite efficiently with the cyanoborylated compound, but not with Rubeppi because it's not reducing enough. But the one thing that surprised me most was when Lucius Schmid and Christoph Kerzig performed these inherent photostability studies. What they did was something rather brutal. They did a cuvette containing micromolar concentrations of these photosensitizers and also of Rubeppi, and they hit that solution with a 1 watt blue laser, steady state, full power. And they saw very rapid photodegradation here of ruthenium tris-bipyridine. After 5 minutes, it was all gone. But in the case of the cyanoborylated variants, here is Lucius's champion complex here. This survives for very long irradiation times, even under these very harsh conditions, which usually you would likely not have in a photocatalysis experiment. So again, a very enjoyable project for me to work with these young talented chemists on that project. So in the last few minutes of this talk, I'd like to briefly speak about molybdenum zero complexes, which Laura Bult in my group discovered a few years back when she was still in Basel. She designed and synthesized these chelating isocyanide ligands here and attached them to molybdenum zero, which is isoelectronic to ruthenium 2+. And what she found out is that these compounds have photophysical properties that resemble those of ruthenium very much, but now with a fairly cheap second row transitional metal ion instead of a precious metal platinum group metal species. What's different, however, to Rubeppi is the reducing ability of these compounds in their electronically excited MLCT states. This is a very strong photoreductant here, far stronger even than the commercial iridium PPY photoreductant here that is used a lot by the organic photoredox catalysis community. And Lara exploited this here, along with Xingwei Guo, in a rearrangement reaction here, which requires an initial reduction step with a very negative potential, a -2 volts versus SCE or so. So the iridium standard catalyst cannot catalyze this reaction. It's not producing enough. Presumably here, the first step is key. The starting material is reduced by the photoexcited molybdenum zero complex to this enolate intermediate A, and this can then undergo reverse, backwards electron transfer with the oxidized molybdenum complex here. And that will lead you to the initial molybdenum zero starting point and to this diradical intermediate B, which can then react onwards to the product. We've never optimized this reaction. We didn't really care at the time. It was a proof of principle, but you can see the tone was low, and likely, had we tried, it would have stayed low because there was a problem with robustness. So in a second generation of compounds and PhD students and postdocs, we decided to introduce more steric congestion at the ligand periphery here, replacing these methyl groups by T-butyls. And in general, what this does, as you know, is it enhances rigidity of these metal complexes. It limits the distortional degrees of freedoms, perhaps shields the metal center from undesired attack. And so this is a fairly trivial design principle to improve photophysical and photochemical properties. Here this worked rather beautifully in the PhD thesis of Patrick Herr and Felix Glaser, who showed jointly that the initial figures of merit here, MLCT lifetimes and photoluminescence quantum yield, can be boosted by nearly a factor of 10 here, simply by introducing these sterically more demanding ligands. And in the context of catalysis, which is in focus today here, this also had a significant impact here. This is a reductive dehalogenation reaction that is key here, the step leading to radical intermediate A and iodide anion here. This is the photochemical key step that cannot be catalyzed by typical iridium sensitizers because they are not reducing enough. The methyl substituted complex of Laurus can do it a bit, but it degrades over time, so you will never run that reaction to completion. However, the new Felix and Patrick catalyst here with the P-butyls at the periphery does catalyze that reaction rather beautifully. And we had then proceeded onward to a third generation of PhD students and complexes. This time here, this is Jakob Bilger working on this yet other variant of a molybdenum zero complex. You can see Jakob made here two significant changes to the ligand design. He introduced these thiophene linkers here instead of 6-membered benzenes. We were hoping that this would influence bite angles. And Jakob also introduced these peripheral aryls here, increasing absorptivities. And this design principle led to a situation where Jakob is now able to excite these compounds in the red spectral range. That had not been possible before. Our previously studied compounds resemble a lot ruthenium tris-bipyridine. This new compound resembles a lot osmium tris-bipyridine. So when Jakob excites that compound into a singlet MLCT, there is rapid, presumably ultra-fast and quantitative intersystem crossing to a triplet MLCT, from which triplet energy transfer to diphenylanthracene here can occur. And you can do this many times if you have a sufficiently high concentration and sufficient high photon flux. You can re-excite this all the time and then build up a fairly large population of triplet excited diphenylanthracenes. And every once in a while, two of such DPAs will undergo triplet annihilation upconversion. And one of them will return to the electronic ground state, whereas the other will be upconverted to the fluorescent singlet excited state. So you get one blue photon out of two red input photons here. And you can study the efficiency and power thresholds into the linear regime. Jakob Bilger did this along with Christoph Kerzig and Chris Larsen in their studies. And you see here how this looks like in reality. You see this is basically the red excitation light coming from the 635 CW laser here. Then the prompt luminescence usually dominates in these schemes here, so I had to scale this down by a factor of 100. But in presence of diphenylanthracene, then you will see a violet emission here, at least on the CCD camera of the iPhone or whatever it was. And so there's a fairly sizable shift here between excitation wavelength and the first vibronic member here of the delayed fluorescence that is occurring. And then the guys did something that I thought was really quite neat. They took a tube, an NMR tube, and they placed into this NMR tube the upconversion mixture. They had the molybdenum complex in there and the diphenylanthracene. They excited this with red light and they got out blue delayed fluorescence. And then they did a radiative energy transfer across a glass wall here. The blue light went out of the NMR tube into the cuvette where they had ruthenium tris by pyridine, which would absorb the blue up-converted light, and only the blue up-converted light, not the red input light. Of course, rubidity is transparent at 635. So after radiative energy transfer, they had photoexcited rubidity intersystem crossing, and they used the triplet MLCT then to drive the photoisomerization reaction here of trans to cis still beam. What I appreciated personally was the concept here of exploiting radiative energy transfer for photocatalysis, and also the fact that this thing was remarkably robust. The turnover numbers are really good. And many of the precious metal-based TTAL conversion systems that I know are not as robust as Jakob's molybdenum system here. So that's it, basically. Time must be up. This is what I presented to you today. Photo-triggered hydrogen atom transfer. This likely occurs from a reductively quenched excited state, so it's not excited state hat, it's only photo-triggered hydrogen atom transfer. Then I showed you the high triplet energy cyanoborylated ruthenium complexes and the molybdenum compounds as alternatives to ruthenium 2+. I'd like to acknowledge briefly Basel, Swiss National Science Foundation, and its research consortium for funding. Funding is extremely important, but having talented, motivated, and kind PhD students and postdocs is equally important. And this is the case for my co-workers, and I feel extremely fortunate with that. And with that note, I'd like to close this talk.
Thank you very much, Oliver, for this very interesting lecture. Right, so the lecture is open for questions. I actually received one question earlier, so maybe I should ask you now, from Professor Punlik Bagat, VIT Vellore, India. So thank you, Professor, for the comprehensive delivery. I have one query. What are the different instrumental techniques to trap free radical intermediates? So that's the question.
So ourselves, in the hydrogen atom transfer experiment, we have not actually trapped them. There are a number of radical traps known in the scientific, physical, organic literature. For example, tempo would be one with which you could potentially intercept your radicals. We usually try to employ time-resolved techniques such as transient UV-vis absorption to monitor the diagnostic UV-vis spectral signatures of radicals, if there are any. I hope that answers that question.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question is from Quarantine Lefebvre. I'm sorry if I could not pronounce your name correctly. So thank you for a very nice talk. What is your feeling about the future of Earth-abundant metal complexes in photocatalysis with electrochemistry? For example, electrophotocatalysis?
Yeah, the big issue there is I see spontaneously right now two potential big issues. Can we get equally good photophysical and photochemical properties with earth-abundant metal complexes as with precious metal-based complexes? I'm very optimistic about that. And there are examples now, not just the work that has been showcased today, but colleagues from the copper community and chromium 3+ community and very, very wide that would probably say the same. Photophysically and photochemically, these things are going to be competitive with precious metal-based complexes. There can be issues with robustness. We struggle with some of them, but we work on them very hard. And also there, I am optimistic. Right now, if you just want to do organic preparations, still you will likely go for the precious metal-based sensitizers, or also some of the very robust push-pull dyes, cyanoarene dyes developed in Germany and elsewhere, acridinium dyes, which also do great. So you have plenty of options there.
All right. Thank you. The next question is by Sarah Babu Sagamuli. So thank you for your wonderful talk. Are these molybdenum complexes bench stable?
Yeah, a bit. So there's the robustness issue. There's molybdenum 0, but then it has these chelating isocyanides which stabilize the low oxidation state, and there's also shielding at the ligand periphery. So as powders, they, to my knowledge, can be stored on the bench, even in a vial. It's better to keep them under argon or nitrogen. But when preparing dilute solutions or when doing photocatalysis, one must go to strictly deaerated conditions. Otherwise, everything will go kaput.
Okay, thank you. The next question is by Isabel Dixon, our old friend. Thank you very much for this talk. What was the solvent that you used for the photostability studies where the ruby quickly disappeared? Do you remember? I remember there's a very steep sort of like curve, but your quickly remain. Yeah.
Acetonitrile, to my recollection. I have to look it up, but spontaneously I'd say acetonitrile. Yeah, the bi-exponential lifetimes of the second generation molybdenum complexes, Sebastiano, we think they are due to conformers. We've had other complexes in the meantime that I've not talked about today now, where there's a lot of clear evidence also by NMR spectroscopy performed here by Christina Wegeberg and Daniel Heusinger in-house, where it was fairly clear that there can be multiple conformers that can give rise to different decay times.
It's just a comment from Penny Brothers, our friend, not related to talks, but she suggested that some feedback for the next event, please aim for better gender diversity of the speaker. Actually, we have considered that. I would like to also mention a little bit earlier with actually from the comments from the associate editor, Elliot. We try our best to include a women in the event. Unfortunately, we are limited to 3 time slot only for this very, with a very time limited sort of like event, and we didn't really have sufficient time to get enough speakers. And we also would like to include as many board members for the 2 journals, as many as possible. But we promise that in the future events, we'll take a close look even at the gender diversity, and there will be other series, other symposia, for example, organized by EurJIC later this year, and definitely women will be included in the playing some role in the event. Thank you for your comment. Thank you. And we do have some more questions. I think we still have time for maybe a few more, so let's go on. So I think there's one question by Vice Daiba. Thank you for the talk. How stable are these molybdenum catalysts? I think you have already briefly addressed the stability of these compounds, right? So maybe I will just skip that. So Sebastiano, again, he's asking, do you have an idea on the origin of the 2 lifetimes in the molybdenum catalyst that you showed? And in the molybdenum compound related to the 2021 paper, is the decay also double exponential?
It's single exponential. It depends. It depends on the individual compound and the steric congestion around the first coordination sphere. So some of our compounds have higher or lower activation barriers for conformer interconversion. And so depending on the height of that barrier, at room temperature, you can get the classic mono exponential decay that you'd like to have. And then in other cases, you get the bi-exponential decay.
Okay. Another question, Kirsten Zeitler. Thank you for the interesting talk. In case your recent reductive pentacle formation, is there somehow another activation involved, as the reduction potential of the complex should not allow for the SET of benzaldehyde?
Yes, thanks, Ken. I'm reading the question. I did not fully grasp it yet.
I try my best to repeat it. In case,
I can see it.
You understand the question, yeah? But you're not very sure about the properties, right? Okay, all right. Let's go for the next one.
I just need a minute, Ken, if I may, to let it sink in, to give at least a halfway intelligent answer.
Okay.
The pinnacle coupling in the case of the cyanoborylated project, yes. I think this goes via the 1 electron reduced form of the metal complex here, ligand-centered electron, and then that potential on this specific complex should actually allow for the single electron reduction of benzaldehyde. I think that should actually be thermodynamically viable. I cannot say anything smarter than that for the moment.
Okay, thank you. Maybe a further question, how about the role of amines in these reactions? Maybe I...
The tertiary amines in the first project, I presume, yeah. So they are sacrificial electron donors. They also play a role as proton donors. That's where the electrons and protons ultimately come from. That's the reductant.
Okay. I think maybe one last question, maybe it's more like a comment by Masahiro Yoshimura. I'm not a catalyst researcher, but material science. So I have some interest in the molybdenum instead of ruthenium-2 complex. What is the origin of the bonding between the molybdenum center and the surrounding complex?
Very briefly, you have the cyanide. If you draw a Lewis structure of an isocyanide, then you have a lone pair at carbon along with a negative charge, and this is a Lewis base, which can bind in a sigma fashion to the molybdenum center. And then vice versa, the molybdenum 0 is very electron rich. It has a full set of T2G electrons which can undergo pi back bonding. And so this will feed metal d-electron density back into a pi star anti-bonding orbital of the isocyanide. And you can see this in IR spectroscopy, for example.
I think in the interest of time, I'm afraid that we have to finish these the very first virtual EurJIC symposium today. And to conclude the symposium, I would like to thank all three outstanding speakers today for the inspiring lectures. And I would also like to thank, of course, Pretty, Elliot, and Ruben for their support. And of course, EJIC, I mean EurJIC, and also Chemistry Europe for their organization. I hope to see each other in person really soon after the pandemic is over. Thank you very much and take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken. Much appreciated for that. Just as a final note, as a reminder, once again, these talks have been recorded and will be available in a subsequent email to you by Workcast. Thanks again to all the speakers, and thank you, Ken, for your moderation. You did a fantastic job with that. And we'll see everybody in the next event. Thank you very much. Bye.